Hello, Doom friends. Smod Man checking in with you again. Kind of gonna do a part 2 video today. A continuation of a previous video I made about 90s Doom, and in particular Hellhound Records. Hellhound Records, the essential label from Germany. This is kind of a continuation. I covered a few bands in the first video, and to keep that video from getting a little too long, I decided to hold off and make another video with a few more bands. Well, this video is going to have a couple other bands from Hellhound Records that I didn't cover in the previous video, as well as one other band that was not on Hellhound Records but was from the same era in the early to mid 90s, and also from the United States as well, but this time from Pittsburgh, not Maryland. So 2 Maryland bands and 1 from Pittsburgh. So all in the northeastern United States, which clearly had a fantastic doom heavy metal scene in the 90s, and they still have a great scene over there in the northeast to this day. Maryland is still ripe with doom bands. They have a huge festival over there called the Maryland Doom Fest, and it's countless bands play. Very famous, and I would love to go to the Maryland Doom Fest someday, but I never find myself over in that part of the country. I live way out in the central part of the country, and that's clear out on the eastern side, and for those of you who don't know, the United States is absolutely massive. It's not like Europe, so it's hard to get across the country. But in this video I wanted to talk about 3 bands. 1, Penance, which is from Pittsburgh, the Pittsburgh band. The Pennsylvania band, the one that's not from Maryland, is called Penance. Penance. Hard for me to pronounce that. But they released a couple great albums in the 90s. The other 2 bands I want to talk about are from Maryland. One is called Revelation. They were really, really great. They released a couple absolutely fantastic doom albums on Hellhound Records. I'll be covering that band, and also I'll be covering Wretched. And Wretched was Dave Sherman's first band. The famous Dave Sherman, who would go on to be a legendary figure in the American doom scene, who would form bands like Earthride later on. And Earthride obviously is a fantastic doom band that I actually used to have on the channel. I uploaded a couple of their albums way back 10 years ago. So I've known Dave Sherman for a long time. Wretched was his first band. This was out on Hellhound Records in the 90s as well. So I'll talk about those 3 bands in this video. And there's still more I could cover, but I got to keep this at a reasonable length. So enjoy the video, part 2 on the 90s Doom, Underground Doom, and Hellhound Record releases. Let's get into it. Thanks for watching. Doom on. Hello everybody. Nice video today talking about some more fantastic underrated Doom albums from the 90s. Many great Doom albums, especially from the early to mid 90s. And these are some more from the United States. First one I want to talk about is called Penance. Now Penance was actually formed out of a band called Dream Death, who were more of a thrash doom band from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, who were formed in 1985. And they were very thrashy, almost like Slayer if they were playing doom. They reminded me, especially the vocal work, of Slayer, 80s Slayer, if they were really doomy. This had a lot of great hardcore vocals and speed bursts, and it was a really great album that they put out called Journey into Mystery. That's a very interesting album, so check that one out. Well, these guys, a couple members went on to form Penance. Brian Lawrence, the vocalist, as well as Terry Weston, they formed Penance, and Penance was formed in 1990. They also had the legendary Mike Smale on drums. Mike Smale was a mainstay of many bands in the doom scene. He was in a lot of bands, including Cathedral, Internal Void, Pentagram, Under the Sun. He played with all those bands at different times. So Mike Smale is a legendary drummer in doom. Well, he formed this band, Penance, with Terry Weston, who were both in Dream Death. They were the core of the band. They also had a notable member, Mary Bielik, from November's Doom in the band. They released their debut album, The Road Less Traveled, which had Brian Lawrence on vocals and guitar, which was released in 1992 on Lee Dorian's label Rise Above Records, obviously the famous Rise Above Records, a very famous pioneering doom label out of England. Of course, Lee Dorian being the Cathedral frontman. Well, along with Revelation's debut, which Revelation we will be talking about later in this video, the debut by Penance was one of the first doom albums on the label. They released their second album, Parallel Corners, in 1994, which was on the European label Century Media. This was considered the band's best album by many, and it's a classic of 90s traditional doom. It's a very, very, very good album. It has some fantastic tracks on it, including the epic 8-minute Born to Suffer, as well as Destroyed by One, which is another 8-minute doom epic. Visions, track 6, another 8-minute. They really stretch out, crushing doom riffs. Reflections, though, track 7, is the masterpiece of the album. Probably the all-time best Penance song. Reflections is beautiful. It has some beautiful ethereal guitar in it, and it's just an anthem of doom. If you listen to one song from Penance, listen to Reflections. Absolutely fantastic song. The album has got amazing songwriting, great vocal work, drumming fantastic, a lot of great musicianship, and a great atmosphere. It also has really good production values as well. Very nice, clean, but also atmospheric doom album with lots of thick, crushing riffs and a lot of melodic solos as well. These 90s doom bands were great at their soloing. The soloing on these doom albums from the 90s, oh my god, just a thing of beauty. And this album has it in spades. Of course, the debut album, The Road Less Traveled, had even slower, longer brooding songs on it. Of course, a couple 10-plus minute songs like Soul Rot and Penance, the self-titled track. It's a great album as well if you really like that slow, cathedral type of sound. If you like the albums like Forest of Equilibrium by Cathedral, you'll really love the debut by Penance, The Road Less Traveled, from 1992. Very drawn out, slow, 55 minutes, only 7 tracks. Great 10-minute opener. Just a fantastic doom album for those that like it really, really slow, brooding, crawling. Terry Weston has some fantastic guitar riffs. Vocalist Brian Lawrence does quite well. His voice is bold and has a nice rasp. It has a distinct edge for this type of music. Fits this crawling doom very, very well. Of course, they had a lineup change for the second album. Brian Lawrence left, and they had a new singer, Lee Smith, on vocals. He has a very sinister voice, perfect for this type of album. They also had a new bass player, Frank Miller, but their guitarist is the same, and they continue to crush you with riffs. Penance would go on to release many other albums, Proving Ground in 1999, Alpha and Omega in 2001, Spiritual Natural in 2003. All very good albums as well, but nothing beats their first 2 records in my book for fantastic early 90s doom. Check out Penance's 2 albums, The Road Less Traveled and Parallel Corners, featuring fantastic guitar work by Terry Weston. Terry Weston, of course, a legendary doom guitarist. Great drums by Mike Smale as well. So much talent in this band, so check out Penance. The next band I wanted to talk about is called Revelation. Revelation was formed in Baltimore in 1986 by the guitarist and vocalist John Brenner, as well as bass player Andy Kramer and drummer Steve Brannigan. Andy left in 1987 and was replaced by Bert Hall Jr. This lineup would record the group's debut album, Salvation's Answer, which was released in 1991. Now, Salvation's Answer is a good album. It has some great tracks. An 8-minute Salvation's Answer. They stretch it out with some crushing doom riffs. Lots of crushing doom riffs. Great solo work on this album as well. There's almost some really nice solos on almost every one of these songs. John Brenner is a classic guitarist, and he lets it rip all over this album. Some fantastic solos in songs like Long After Midnight, Poets and Paupers. Waiting for the End is a great closing track, which slows it down and gets to be one of the doomiest tracks on the album. And Images of Darkness, one of my favorites on the album, 7 minutes long. Really great riffs and vocal work on that one. But Revelation would go on to release another album the next year with a slightly different lineup. Paul would leave and was replaced by Josh Hart. They released Never Come Silence, their second album, in 1992. Now this was a fantastic doom album, one of my favorites from the early 90s. 70 minutes long, 9 tracks. They kick off with Against Nature, 7-minute opening track. Really great stuff. Ashes, an 8-minute track, a really great track as well. Spectre, one of my favorite songs on the album, 8 minutes long. Beautiful guitar work on this album. Lots of crushing doom atmosphere on it, but the vocal work is so great. The album has some real beauts on it. Spectre, of course, Wounds Which Never Heal, and the closing track, Never Comes Silence, which is an 18-minute doom epic. Yes, 18 minutes long, and it alternates between soft, ethereal passages and heavier, doom-laden passages. Alternates between the soft and the heavy, and builds, and it's just a beautiful track. There's so much beautiful guitar work on this album where they go and they get a little bit mellow and almost acoustic sounding, very ethereal, but they always bring it back and go slow and doomy again. The songwriting is so good on this album. It's probably the best Revelation album. They would again have another lineup change for their third album, Yet So Far, which was released in 1995. The one remaining member, Steve Brannigan, recruited a new vocalist and guitarist, Dennis Cornelius, and a new bassist, Jim Hunter. Yet So Far is another great doom album. Despite the new lineup, the riffs are really great on this album as well. Again, another crushing doom album. Lots of great long tracks like Alone and Yet So Far, 8+ minutes. Soul Bearer kicks the album off, Eternal Search, all really great songs. Morning Sun. These are crushing songs. The riffs don't let up. The new guitarist and vocalist Dennis Cornelius does a fantastic job of replacing the previous fantastic John Brenner. John Brenner, with his guitar work, hard to replace, but Dennis Cornelius does a fantastic job. They would go on to release a couple more records in the 2000s, including Revelation and For the Sake of No One, and one called Release. Although the early albums, their first 3 albums, especially Never Comes Silence and Yet So Far, are their 2 best albums. Again, from Maryland, so this is another Maryland band. The Maryland doom scene continues to dominate. And of course, speaking of the Maryland doom scene, how could we forget Wretched? Wretched being the original band formed by Dave Sherman, the famous Dave Sherman of the American doom scene, who would go on to play bass in Spirit Craven and form and sing Earthride. Earthride, a great doom band that I have known for a long time. I actually uploaded a couple of their albums about 10 years ago on Smod. I actually hadn't heard Wretched until very recently, and they're a really, really great 90s band. Early to mid 90s, they actually released 3 albums. They had Dave Sherman as a vocalist along with John Blank, and they had Jeff Parsons on guitar. Now, Jeff Parsons was a fantastic stoner doom guitarist from the 90s. He was in other stuff as well. He actually played on Unorthodox's debut album that I already talked about in a previous video. So Jeff Parsons was a pretty prolific musician in the doom scene, and they released 3 albums, all on Hellhound Records. So here's another Hellhound band. They released their debut, Life Out There, in 1993. They would follow up Life Out There with 2 albums, back-to-back years, so 3 years, 3 albums. Psychosomatic Medicine in 1994, and then Center of the Universe in 1995. So a pretty prolific band, and each album was very, very good. They didn't really have any drop-off. Really nice, crunchy, psychedelic doom. Really, really good stuff. If you're into 90s stoner psych doom, boy, this is a great band. And of course, Spirit Craven, the band that Dave Sherman would go on to play bass in, also a very great band. So check out Wretched, especially if you're a fan of Earthride. That's going to wrap up this video about some 90s doom bands that you should check out. So check out all 3 of these bands: Penance, Revelation, and Wretched. Thanks for listening to the presentation today. I will talk to you later. Doom on, guys.